Good evening and welcome to Iowa News and Views. My name's Joe Balcom. I'm the host of the program. Thanks for being with us. Before we get going, I'd like to let you know that we're still on the road. We've been moved out of our studio at Public Access Studio in Iowa City as they go through a move, and we're here in Des Moines today, and we'll tell you a little bit more about that in a moment. I'd like to note that this public access station is not responsible for the content of the program. I'm responsible for what I say, and our guests are responsible for what they say. The topic tonight is empowering local communities, ? And efforts going on in the state. Today it's August 3rd. We happen to be visiting today with Ralph Rosenberg, who is the Executive Director of the Coalition for Family and Children's Services here in Iowa. Ralph, it's good to have you on the program.
Thank you very much for having us here. Thank you.
The discussion tonight is going to focus on the changing service delivery system in the state of Iowa. This last legislative session, the Iowa General Assembly passed a bill that essentially provided opportunities for local communities to become involved in planning and implementing programs for children and families.
Right.
Before we get to that, could you tell us a little bit about your organization, the Coalition for Family and Children's Services?
Sure. Thanks, Joe. Coalition for Family and Children's Services is it's like a trade association, and I think a lot of your listeners understand the concept of trade association. But what we're made up of is we're an umbrella group for agencies that serve children and families across the state of Iowa. Our agencies have locations in all 99 counties, and we literally serve thousands of children and families throughout the state. We do everything from work with teen moms, we deliver women, infant, and children's services, we have shelter care, we provide detention services, in-home services, out-of-home services. We do everything including family foster care, group care, psychiatric mental institutions for children are also providers within our agencies. So it's a full range continuum, and we are the coalition. And the services we provide to our member agencies include services that are traditional to trade associations. So we do lobby in the legislature, and we do work with also our federal elected officials as well. We also have we're in the third year of a grant to address issues of devolution and block grants. And actually, even though this empowerment was just passed this last year in the legislature, this is the third year that our coalition has been involved with other groups, and perhaps we can talk more about that. The other thing our coalition's been doing in partnership with the state, and if I can show this really wonderful poster, is we, in contract with the Department of Human Services, we do the special needs adoption for the state of Iowa. And it's something that's been very successful. We help coordinate the recruitment for parents who are interested in adopting special needs children. And like in any show, I want to give some phone numbers. There's an 800 number, 1-800-243-0756. You can call any hour of the day. You may get a recording. Just leave your name and phone number, and we can get information back to you about special needs adopted kids. We also have a phone number, local number, 244-0074. As you can see, is that we have there are a lot of children at risk in the state who've already had their rights terminated and who need to have what's called a forever family. And we put out a lot of periodicals. We work a lot with the public-private sectors. This is really I think this is an example of a success story where the private and the public sector has worked together.
Very good. And
we're in our, I think it's our fourth year of that grant.
Sure. I'd also like to note that Ralph formerly served in the Iowa General Assembly, both in the House and in the State Senate, and he's been a longtime veteran of public policy making. It seems like a role just made ready for you. Ralph, there was a report out last week that in Iowa, Iowa was the leading state for places to raise kids. What did that report tell us, and who put that out, and is it true?
Well, the report was put out by a DC-based group. I think it's called the Children's Rights Council, and I believe they gathered their information from a variety of sources. I understand they gathered it from the FBI, which would have dealt with crime and delinquency statistics. I believe they also gathered some from the American Legislative Exchange Council, which is a national kind of support group for legislators, and I think they had 2 or 3 other entities. This is not the only group that surveys and rates states. And so when I want to answer a question, is it a surprise? No, it's not a surprise. Overall, Iowa is a good state. Overall, Iowa has always rated in about the top 5 or top 10 in the country, overall. And how do we feel about it is is not an easy answer, because on the one hand you want to say that we're doing certain things well. We provide certain services well, both in the public sector or the private sector, that we can reach out to kids and families to do something well. On the other hand, we don't want to lull us into a false sense of complacency. We still have problems in the state of Iowa, and I think the citizens of Iowa want to measure us not just how well we're doing against other states, but also how well we do against ourselves. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it may not be fair to the state of Mississippi. Sometimes you say, well, how does, we just only want to compare ourselves with what the teen birth rate or what the delinquency or the dropout rate is in Mississippi. We want to compare it as how well we're doing against ourselves over the last 5 or 10 years. And I think there's some areas of concern. I mean, we're concerned about the other 49 states, but we also have to make sure that we're constantly moving up. And there's some trends that certainly worry us and that I think do accurately reflect some of the trends in the streets, and that we see like Joe and Mary's six-pack are worried about. There is some increase in delinquency in this state that we're worried about. There's some increases in the deaths, what's called the suicide, the non-accidental deaths, homicides of teens, and those increases are concerning us. In a sense, any level of teen moms, low birth weight babies is of concern as well. We're seeing, while we see some drops in child abuse and runaways over the last year, which is good, over the last 5 years the numbers are still up, which is not good. We don't want kids on the streets. And interestingly, we have a very high disproportionate level of kids, of homeless in the state, are kids, unfortunately. Right. Actually, we're probably one of the highest in the country in terms of all the people that are homeless. The percentage of kids in Iowa is very high. So I'm glad we have a high rating. It's people who work in the system should be proud of a high rating, but I think people should not be lulled in a sense of complacency. And when you look at a high rating compared to what, you have to be concerned. We know some of these trends. Some of the demographics worry us. We are now reaching a peak of kids that are in the teen years in the state of Iowa. And in the next 2 or 3 years, we're going to see this growth in the number of the population that really produces our at-risk kids. And we think there's going to be an increased demand for services. So I think it's something you use, but I think you have to look at the trends. You have to look at what we do well. I think we do some things well, but there's other things we still have problems with. And I think Iowans should feel good about it, but there's other things we need to work on.
Good. The Empowerment Zone legislation that was passed this year that provided an opportunity for the state basically to transfer responsibility in a way to local communities. And that Empowerment Zone legislation would require communities to counties, school boards, and cities, and human service organizations and citizens, big part citizens, to develop a planning and a set of programs funded by state government to basically implement programs for children and families. How's that legislation unfolding around the state and with groups you work with, and is this going to work for us?
Well, it's a new child. I mean, it's brand new. It's not even 1 year old. It was just passed by the 98 legislative session, and to some extent it was a product out of an interim committee. As you know, the legislature does do work in the summer and fall, and they've had a 2-year interim on restructuring human services. And in part it came from some sense that they wanted to restructure how human services are at the state level. I think people need to know that this is a part of a trend. And we can now throw out words called devolution and block grants, but it's something that's been done at the national level and the state level. Devolution is the idea that instead of some decisions being made at the federal level, like in D.C., the decisions should be made at state capital levels, like in Des Moines, or even lower. That we devolve the authority from a centralized area of the federal government to as local as possible. And that trend has been endorsed by the contract with America endorsed devolution, and President Clinton has endorsed the concepts, the general concept of devolution. The other thing empowerment areas reflect is a trend back to block grants, which we've had off and on. President Nixon had block grants, and President Johnson had block grants. It's a concept, instead of dollars being sent in various types of silos, separate silos of categories, you get a larger pool of dollars which hopefully would provide some greater flexibility. And the block grants get sent from, again, the federal government down to the state and local areas. Empowerment areas are an example of devolution, an example of block grants. It's brand new. There may be as many different empowerment areas as there are groups that form.
Mm-hmm.
Some may be within one county, some may be multiple counties, particularly in the more rural areas. The first level of funding, I think, is in September, and there's a second level that's eligible in December, so groups are meeting as we speak.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Forming groups, trying to prioritize. There's about $9 million that's made available by the state, and we think some of that is a good idea, that the state didn't try not to steal from Peter to pay Paul, although it may have taken some child care dollars, which worry some people. We think some of that money is certainly brand new money, which is good. One of the things that happens in politics is this thing about stealing from Peter to pay for Paul. You come up with a new idea, but you take from something good to pay for the new idea.
So are communities prepared for this? I know in Johnson County we've been meeting, the Board of Supervisors and a variety of other players
but that's
trying to bring that together. We already have a pretty organized system.
Sure, Johnson. Sure, and a lot of systems have. I mean, you look at some of the existing decategorization projects that have been around for 10 years, which are also examples of sort of block grants. And you look at some of the areas. Scott County's been around for a while, or Lynn County, or Polk County, or Story County. They've been around. They have some expertise. They have resources, too. No, I don't think everyone's ready for it. And I think there's some concerns out there. Whether the legislation can address those concerns, but I know some legislators, and one legislator from eastern Iowa really eloquently mentioned, he said that some of the regions with the greatest resources are the ones that are going to quickest be able to form. They're going to know how to write the grant, because you have to apply for a statewide entity. They're going to know how to, they're going to have those boilerplate little contracts. They're going to know how to run meetings. They can bring in people to get together. They know how to publicize it. They know how to use the media, and they're going to get the money. Unfortunately, some of the areas, in some of the more remote areas, and some of the not so wealthy areas in Iowa lack the resources and may lack some of the connections. And I think there's some concerns about that. Empowerment areas aren't designed to go statewide automatically. They are designed to be phased in over a number of years. But I think, in answer to your question, no, the whole state's not ready for it.
Okay. You're watching Iowa News and Views. My name's Joe Balcom. Our guest today is Ralph Rosenberg. Ralph is the Executive Director of the Coalition for Family and Children's Services here in Iowa. I'd like to take a moment to thank you for tuning in, and also to let you know that we recently had an election in Iowa City at the University of Iowa Hospitals and Clinics. I'd like to congratulate the Service Employees International Union, or SEIU, for their victory there at the hospital, organizing nurses and other healthcare professionals as they try to address some of the concerns of managed care. And so congratulations to them on that victory. If you have an idea for a show or for a guest for a show, you can send us some email, and there's our email address. Or you could also visit our website, which is noted on that card, or, boy, we've got more information here. You could also call us at 319-337-6280. If you got all that, you can really write fast. We'll leave that up for a minute. Again, congratulations to SEIU. We're visiting with Ralph Rosenberg, and if you want to get hold of Ralph, his phone number's on here. We'll just leave that up for the remainder of the show. You can check that out. Ralph, we're moving towards local control.
Right.
Real question of whether communities are able to deal with this or not. It's a great idea. Who could be against local control? But there's a concern that we're going to have this uneven system where those counties you noted who have the resources to get organized, which is really what we're talking about here, is, in a sense, a massive community organizing effort.
Oh, I think so. And I think there is some question, maybe rural versus urban, or wealthy versus not so wealthy areas. I think there's also some concerns that even though people want to have government very close to the people, we also want it to be efficient. And we want to make sure that, you might say, that there's equal access. So if someone in Mills County has a good runaway program, but Montgomery doesn't, is that, so what, Montgomery families are all going to go to Mills County? Or Mills says, I don't want to take your runaway programs? Or what do you do to ensure some sense of minimum standards of core services for kids and families? And if, you know, if you think of, and I think that's a challenge. If you've got a kid that has some very serious needs, but you're in a county that doesn't provide these services, what are you going to do? Because the kid next county gets those services. So I think there's a role for the state to ensure some equal access or minimum access. I think there's a role for the state to establish some what I call economies of scale. I mean, you don't want to have, there could be, oh, I don't know how many empowerment areas. You can have 50, 100 counties, but you could have more than that empowerment. And I don't think you want to have like more than 100 different contracts, 100 different outcomes, because a lot of this is based on we want to see results, which is good, but you don't want to have different standards for results. I don't know if you want to have 100 different eligibility standards for kids and services. And so I think there's a tension between you want to have some statewide standards by which you can measure, compare, and contrast different regions of the state.
Are we going to get that? I know in the managed care area for mental health services, we have managed care plans at the counties, right? We have 99 different plans, 99 different set of criteria. In those, as you point out, some counties are going to do a better job, and are the citizens from other counties going to come to those counties for those better services? We certainly see that in Johnson and in probably Story and other places. Is the state prepared to step up and establish those minimum standards?
And they might, and let's say the state does, and let's say the state establishes something like legal settlement, which people in the mental health area are very familiar with, which has been tough to do. And let's say the state tries to deal with it, but then what happens if you're from a county that doesn't provide these minimum services? It's hard. There's an issue of accountability here too, and I think the people in empowerment areas are still working out. I mean, who's ultimately accountable? Is it this local empowerment area? Is it going to be a statewide board, which is there's a current transitional board that, and the final one will ultimately be appointed probably by Governor Branstad, because I think it has to be in place by December. Who's going to be accountable for this so that if people don't like how services are being provided, they can respond to it? I mean, in the current system, it's in a sense a little cleaner. You know, with the Department of Human Services or the juvenile courts when it provides certain services. Now it's going to get obscured a little bit. On the other hand, you're primarily dealing with certain funding pots. One of the goals is they wanted to integrate the whole funding system. They wanted to do from dollars from human services, dollars from education, dollars from public health, and we haven't reached that point yet. Sort of human services is kind of the guinea pig for this, but one of the goals in local control and block grants is you can integrate all these dollars and get flexibility. And so I think those are some of the tests. Are you really going to get flexibility? Are you really going to increase the access to people regardless of where they live in the state of Iowa? Are you really going to eliminate some of these artificial barriers between funding streams? And we'll just have to see, but I think what we need to do is make sure we set up some standards themselves for the empowerment areas, like what do we want them to accomplish? And the other thing is I think we should learn from our mistakes in other areas. And Joe, you were just talking about the mental health, and they went, maybe I shouldn't say past tense, they're still going through some working out, you know, what's the role of merit and what's the role of the CPCs, the Center Appointed Coordinators in the adult mental health system, and we should learn from that as we move to empowerment areas.
That's good. That's a model that is a little bit ahead of this one. Local control sounds good, but local control can also mean not doing very much at all, and it could mean doing a whole lot.
Well, it is. It could be different. I mean, what if some local entities decide to return to 30, 40 years ago, where individuals would have to go before a local group and say, I need some funds for food stamps, or I need some low-income housing money, or my kid has a serious mental health problem, please help me. Do we want to return to that area where individual family members have to appeal to a board? You know, we've moved away from that. Generally, we have advocates for them. It could be private sector, or it could be Department of Human Services, so that people don't have to plea on behalf of themselves for services. But when you get to the local level, what's going to happen? And we don't have that worked out yet.
Sure.
But most legislators are excited about it, Joe. I mean, make no bones about it.
I realize that.
And it's bipartisan excitement.
Right. Well, those of us working in local government know the challenges, and frankly, there's quite a cost involved administratively to simply go out and organize this. We don't have money to hire staff to go out and essentially organize this whole new network of providers and the like. And there's a cost that we're experiencing.
You have property taxes. You can just raise property taxes
it's not
to
that
do it.
easy, Ralph.
Yeah, oh, that's right. You still have that cap on property taxes, but I think a lot of county officials are a little nervous about it. They just aren't sure. And it's like a new entity, and it's got a lot of potential, but I think they're concerned about some of their liability.
Definitely. Ralph, in terms of getting people involved in this issue, around
Sure.
the state. There's a citizen component. I believe the
Oh,
local empowerment
strong.
boards have to have 51%
Yes.
citizens
And elected officials.
and elected
So,
officials.
Yeah, very
elected
strong.
officials can be considered citizens.
Yeah,
which
I'm not
is,
sure. It gets confusing. I think it's real important citizens need to get involved. And citizens, I mean, we're all citizens, but we're also talking about people who are consumers, people that actually use some of the services that, you know, because they have come from at-risk or troubled families or whatever. We want those people. We want people involved who've actually used the system in the past, that maybe have received food stamps or who've got kids that have received some disability assistance. We need to have those people involved at the local level and at the state level. And the stakeholders who provide the services, whether it's private providers like in my coalition, or our Coalition of Family Children Services, or public providers like in the Department of Human Services or courts, they'll be involved too, but we also need the families. And I think we need individuals, maybe business types who used to serve on a board of directors or who volunteered or were involved in a United Way. We need those people as well involved in this, because if it's a narrow group of people, then you probably won't reach all the goals of empowerment. So they can be involved. Some areas have already established local empowerment. Now, there's no, the problem with local control is there's no really one number I can give, but I think people can contact sometimes the local Department of Human Services or juvenile court officers or the local county. Most of those folks are going to be involved. The local school district's probably going to be involved in it. The meetings have to be public. You have a right to attend. And I think consumers should say, I want to be involved. I want to serve on the board. I want to help represent this community and what it means to meet the needs of children and families. I wish I had one number to call, but we haven't reached that, which is ironically one of the challenges of local control. There'll be 30 different numbers to call.
You could certainly try your Board of Supervisors office or your local school district.
Right.
They're very involved, or even the Public Health Department. There's some public health money included in here as well. Ralph,
Right, there is. That's right.
Any closing thoughts on empowerment zones and where we're headed in Iowa with Children and Family Services?
I think I hope that Children and Family Services make the radar screen of the gubernatorial debates and the legislative debates this year. They've already reached it in terms of education component, but I think there's this other component of what the needs of kids are. We know about the need for 0 to 5 programs, which a lot of is the initial goal for empowerment, is to reach 0 to 5 age, to get the kids ready for school. And I hope that the public reinforces that that should be a primary goal, and that they push the legislators or legislative candidates, they push the gubernatorial candidates saying, you know, let's fully fund that 0 to 5, that preventive or early intervention mode, and make it really a campaign issue this year.
So children and family are the focus. That's good. Empowerment zones, they're coming to Iowa, they're here. We encourage you to get involved in it. There's a place for every citizen to participate. Get in touch with your Board of Supervisors, school board, etc. They can help you get it going. How are things going in Story County on this?
Well, in Story County, well, actually, I'm a little bit involved in Story. I mean, here our Coalition of Family Children Services is statewide, although I still reside in Story County. Story County is interesting because Story County is an example. They've already had some integrated services, because in Story County, he's already had examples where the city, the university, the county, and the United Way have already combined to have a group called an asset. So they already have a pool of dollars that have already been combined, been in existence 15 or 20 years. Plus, Story County also has a decategorization pool, and now we have empowerment. And so I think Story County is an example of the challenges where you have all these existing efforts, and empowerment areas is now a new existing effort. And I think that's one challenge I haven't mentioned before, is sometimes we pile one good idea onto another without first figuring out whether it works enough, the first idea. So
that surely is happening right now in the state of
Yes,
Iowa.
it is.
Well, I'd like to thank you, Ralph,
Thanks,
for being
Joe.
with us today. It's been a
Thank
pleasure.
you very much.
We're here now for the People's Podium. Carlos Jayne, who's the legislative advocate for the United Methodist Church, is with us to talk about prison building in Iowa.
Well, prison building in Iowa is something that we've been very concerned about for quite a number of years, but particularly in the last 4 years. Just at this last legislative session, they approved 900 additional beds in the state. And previous to that, the 3 previous years, it had been 750 beds each at 3 new prisons. So we're having a burgeoning population in our prisons, and it's of great concern to a lot of people because what they're doing is putting a lot more people in prison who are in there for nonviolent crimes. The Get Tough policy that this legislature has taken over, hook, line, and sinker, has just made it very difficult for us to be dealing with this thing on a reasonable basis. No one wants to keep people out of prison who are violent and who need to be treated. Part of the difficulty is people are not being treated in prison. We need more programming in prison to help people get out and to help people stay out once they are out. We need more substance abuse treatment, and yet the only solution we seem to have is to punish them. And one of these days we're going to have to come to the realization that in the long run it's going to pay to invest money now in the kind of programming that will help people get out of prison and stay out of prison. So what we are pushing in our legislative agenda is for more programming to be done in the area of community-based corrections. That is what we need. Iowa has been known for that for many years, and for us to use this less and less each year and go to institutional prisons just doesn't make any sense. We in Iowa have always been progressive really in this area, and for us now to be adopting the method of retribution rather than rehabilitation just doesn't seem to make any sense. Consequently, I have formed a group called the Coalition for Prison Reform. We hope at the next legislative session to have a list of things that will be possible for legislators to think about that will actually end up saving the state money by way of providing programming instead of more prison space.
Carlos, thank you for that thoughtful commentary. I'll look forward to learning more about that, the work of the coalition in the coming months. You've been watching Iowa News and Views. The director for the program this evening has been Rusty Martin. Thank you, Rusty. I produced it. Thanks for that. And remember, this is just a TV program. What's important is what you're doing in your community each and every week to make it a better place. We'll see you next time.